Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this AFK journey video. So in this AFK journey video, we're going to run through the top 5 Clashfront teams with regards to the current meta. So before we start, for these teams, I've ran through multiple different accounts with different districts and multiple different matches to come to the conclusion of these top 5 teams. And I will be breaking down the mechanics, why the team is insanely good in the top 5, and talk about the combo, synergies, as well as substitutes you can use. And before we start, all these teams are assuming or built on the assumption that you have them at equal tiers. For example, there are certain units that will have much higher Paragon tiers in your account compared to others. For example, Siren being a newer unit might be at a lower tier because you might not have fully invested in that unit. Then you might have OD at Paragon 4, for example. That's where OD should be the core units you build your team around, and OD will definitely give you a better PvP advantage because of the bonus Paragon stats itself. Right, but these teams that I'm going to talk about, it's assuming if you have the same stats as your opponent, if you have the same stats across all the units, these are the best teams, and I will be breaking down the team builds as well as the synergies in this video while showcasing the battles itself. So without further ado, let's jump into the top 1 and 2. So it is top 1 and 2 right here because for the Siren and Cryonaya team versus the Bonitasi team itself, let me explain the Siren Cryonaya team first, because this team is a team which I honestly think is top 1, but because Siren is a relatively new unit and Cryonaya as well, there's not a lot of data for me to safely say that this is a top 1 team itself. Because let me explain why this is a top 1 team. Number 1, Cryonaya is a really powerful carry if you're able to get to her ultimate. She single-handedly wins you the battle if you're able to get to her ultimate, and because you're running multiple Celestial Hypogean units in the team itself, Celestial Hypogean units naturally has that Paragon or Rivalry stats advantage even if you are on the same tier as your enemy. So for those of you guys who do not know, your Supreme Plus Celestial Hypogean character is technically a Paragon 1 S level normal character itself. So this is where this team has the natural stats advantage, has one of the strongest hyper carry if she's able to get her ultimate off, has one of the strongest disruptor in the form of Siren, which is able to silence your opponent's Storm Strike or Thunder Strike spell to sort of slow down the burst, as well as give you that head start because you're able to confine the enemy to slow down their offenses with the additional stats of this team itself. So for this team, the core of the team would be Siren, Cryonaya, as well as Twins for you to get the Celestial Factional bonus. Additionally, you want Celestial Factional bonus because Celestial Factional bonus gives you that additional energy at the start of battle for your twins to come online faster. So for the artifact of choice, you can choose between all the artifacts that gives you haste. For this case, we are using Harmonic Spell as the recommendation because Harmonic Spell has the most offensive stats, and the idea of this team is Siren will slow down the opponent, silence them in the first 8 seconds to prevent all the different burst artifacts from coming online, and then you get Twins to sort of speed up the Cryonaya ultimate so that Cryonaya will be able to carry you in battle. So this is how this team works, and I actually wanted to put this team in top 1, but like I mentioned earlier, there wasn't too much data for me to safely call it the top 1, so I'm going to put it at the top 1 or 2 because this team is a team that can beat the Thunder Strike comms in general because of the Siren silence. And for the substitute portions, we have Hugin. For other sustain, you can use Ludovic because you just need that sustain to protect your Cryonaya. I'll say that the bonus that Hugin has over Ludovic would be our dear Hugin having that initial energy, so that your Hugin as well as your Siren, they can be good baits for that Lily May across the different teams of different opponents, because Lily May is a very common character. So this team has Hugin as well as Siren against Lily May as well, has Siren against all the Thunder Strike comms, and has Cryonaya, which basically wins you the game if she gets to her ultimate first, making this team an insanely solid team. So for the substitute other than Hugin for all the sustain units, you can actually also switch out Fresto for any other good tanks, but you need to sort of fill up that other slots with another Celestial Hypogean character, either through Scarlita or Tadin or Barrel, to keep your Celestial Factional talent itself. So this is team 1, right, or top 1 2 Siren Cryonaya team. Now for the next team, right, this is definitely top 1 for most players because these units are easily the most accessible and I'll say the easiest to build up in terms of their tiers for most of the normal units. So this is the Bonnie Tazi Strike team. So this Thunderstrike artifact together with Bonnie is just really powerful. In fact, Thunderstrike works with a lot of very bursty comms because you are able to bring down the opponent really fast through this Thunderstrike combo. And the reason why this team is stronger compared to other teams is because you have the likes of Damien as well as Tazi, which are really hard to kill. Talon with that Pyre of Renewal also gives you the additional layer of revive, and also the magical damage from the whole team from Talon, Tazi as well as Bonnie is just incredible for you to quickly proc that Thunderstrike spell, for you to burst down most comms in the current meta right now. And this team has one of the highest, I'll say, like match showcase in terms of the different records I have, because this is one of the most common teams for people to get to high Paragon tiers. And with regards to the units itself, they are also easily accessible. Tazi from the seasonal store, Hewin from the arena store, Damien from the dream store, and Bonnie, which would probably come towards the end of the season, as well as one of the last units from the previous season, is also relatively accessible. So this team itself, for the substitute, you can substitute Hewin for Bryon for that more initial burst, as well as Lily May bait. But Lily May is not exactly the best against this comp, because Thunderstrike basically nukes down Lily May if your Bonnie spreads the decay to her. So that's how powerful this comp is. And then you can also switch out Hewin for Lenya for factional bonus, as well as Lenya sniping potential against certain very powerful carry teams in general. So based off the tiers of your units, you do the necessary substitutes. And then for Talon, if you do not have Talon, you can just use other magical damage dealers such as Lily May, Siren, as well as Satrana, or just any other magical damage dealers that you have at the highest tier, because the core of this team is the Wilders to give you that invincibility for your Bonnie as well as one of your carries, and then the sustain from Hewin as well as Damien will draw the fight so long that the Tazi Bonnie plus Talon combo bursts down most of the opponent itself. So this is the Bonnie Tazi Strike team. I'll say this is probably top 2 if I do a direct comparison to Siren and Cryonaya, but because I don't have a lot of data of Cryonaya versus other comps in general, I'll just put 2 of them as the top 1 or top 2. So these are the 2 teams, 2 of the strongest teams in the meta right now. And then top 3, we have Dun and Dino with the Wildest Tau. So Dun and Dino is undoubtedly the strongest comp in the previous season, but with the latest additions in the units like Bonnie as well as the Thunderstrike spell, Dino actually gets nuked down really easily without that Wildest invincibility protection at the start. So that's why you're running Dun and Dino with the Wildest Tau. So that's why the core is Dun as well as Dino and Damien. So Damien is important in a sense in this team. If you want to run this team itself, you can obviously run other buffers like Laika or other buffers like Skalita in the Damien slot, right? But Damien gives you that Wildest link as well as at that additional 100 haste, which is very crucial to build up and, you know, burst the opponent from there. So this is why I put him as a core. So for the substitute, you can replace Lily May or Lawson with Laika. So this makes you more bursty, giving you the additional stack on your Dino faster, but at the same time making you a little bit more vulnerable to burst comps in general, because Laika's not exactly the tankiest unit and she doesn't have that much elusiveness compared to Damien or Lily May. And then you can also put Lily May with Skalita. This will give you the Celestial Tau, provided if your Skalita is sufficiently built up. So there are certain accounts where you start off for a really long time and you might have Skalita at the Paragon 2 or Paragon 3 tier, and that's where your Skalita with that Celestial Hypogym bonus as well as Rivalry stats bonus could give you that additional stats for surviving, right, for your Dino to pull through to prevent him from being busted. So the difference between using a Wildest Tau as well as a Celestial Tau is that Wildest Tau has that invincibility, which protects Dino a little bit better from all the different bursts in the current meta right now. So this is where your Dino can come online and then start to kill people, and then you start to steamroll from there. So that's the idea of this team, right? Dun silences the opponent, really good against Iron teams, really good against ultimate centric teams, but not that good against Bonnie, Tazi burst comps, because like they are not that ultimate reliant, right? They are very powerful with their ultimate, but they don't need their ultimate to win. Same thing for Cryonaya. So this is one team that can actually counter the Cryonaya comp. However, at the same time, like I mentioned, mentioned earlier, this comp also has quite a fair bit of sustain as well as control, which could slow your opponent down. And that's where if Cryonara comes online faster, Dan and Dino team might still die, right? Before Dan is able to come online. So there are a lot of different variables with regards to the team. But I'll say in most matchups, because the Tasi team is very prevalent, Dan and Dino right now is not as strong against those teams, or they will get bursted decently easily if the opponent's slightly stronger or ahead in terms of stats. That's why I'm putting them on the top 3. So for this one, we're using Light Forge to hyper buff Dino, but you can use other buffing artifacts like Harmonic to give you that buff on Dino to fill up the Nectar Feast stacks itself. So this is the third most powerful team. Okay, so for the fourth team, we have the Iron Armor's Ardent Burst. I think this team needs no introduction. It is one of the oldest team in the meta and it's still really prevalent because of the control and burst potential. So the core of the team is Iron Armor's Ardent Burst, like I mentioned. So this will give you that Wildest Factional Talent, which gives you Inbound, which can actually protect you from the initial burst from some teams. And at the same time, this team is relatively flexible in terms of the artifact side, because instead of Overcharge spell, you can use Harmonic, Light Surge or Frostfall, or even Snowman. Snowman gives you that additional control with that Snowman Taunt. Frostfall gives you the additional Blizzard, because this team activates the ultimate almost immediately in most cases, so you get that Blizzard trigger really fast. You can also use Light Surge for the additional shielding as well as magical damage to synergize with the magical damage team, or even Harmonic spell for just more raw offensive stats. So very flexible in terms of the artifact. And in terms of the substitutes, we are running Niru to bait out your opponent Lily May as well as have additional sustain. So ideally you want to use Niru over Bryon because of that sustain portion, because you only need 3 Wildest character for the factional talent. So since you have Iron Armors and Ardent, then you can actually just run Niru. But Bryon's also an okay pick to be placed in front of Iron to bait out opposing Lilime. Then that way you will reduce the direct counter that this team has from 2 to 1. So another direct counter is done. So done just shuts down the ultimate to prevent the combo from happening. So this is where Dun and Dino counters this comp, right? But then Dun and Dino is not a common team, so this is where Lilime will be your next most common counter, and that's why you put Niru into the team. So for Elsa's case, you can use Carolina a little bit slower. You can use Satrana for that magical damage as well as spark damage over time and damage reduction or vitality reduction to kill your opponent easily against certain sustain comps, or even just run Siren yourself, right, to slow down the opponent, to burst them down with the Siren magical damage and support. Or you can also replace Ardent with Bryon or Lilime just to fill up that Wildest slot, or just give you additional damage based on your strongest units in your account. So that's for the Iron Armors team. Top 4. Okay, so for the 5th team, I have quite a few options, but I'll just give it to the Odie Wildest team. Number 1, because Odie is one of the most built characters across multiple different accounts, so it is quite easy to build around Odie as a hyper carry, and supporting Odie with the Wildest factional talent is a way for you to win. So more specifically, I choose the more sustain heavy variant to have a better fighting chance against all the burst variant, because in this team, if the opponent uses the Bonitasi comp, because your Lilime as well as your OD, they are inbound, what will happen is your Bonnie skill will actually fall on Hewin, right? So if your Hewin is able to survive with that magic charm ability, she will be able to quickly get energy and then get her ultimate off. And then this is where your Lilime as well as OD can start carrying you by sniping the opponent down or just jumping around doing a lot of damage while cancelling your opponent's ultimate. So for this team itself, if you're running this exact variant, you're also having that additional stats from Fresto, assuming you have Fresto at the highest tier, right, in your whole team itself. So this team has quite a fair bit of sustain to stall the fight, so that OD will eventually steamroll with that Wildest support at the start to prevent him from being sniped down in general. So this is one team which I use a lot myself. So these are the different substitutes. So you can substitute Fresto for other tanks, but generally speaking, I think you can actually run other Wildest tank, and that will free up your Damien for other teams or your Hewins for other teams in general. So this will depend on how much you are using your Damien for other teams archetype, because over here Damien as well as Hewin is used in the Tarsi Bonnie comp. So let's say if you're already using them, then this comp might not be a comp that you can form, despite I'll say being pretty strong in terms of the synergy as well as power level. However, with regards to the last team, let's say if you are using Damien and Hewin for another team and you want another decently strong combo team, you can try these Graveborn Assassin teams. So this Graveborn Assassin team basically runs off that Graveborn factional talent to do that quick damage onto the opponent, and then have your assassin jump on your opponent's backline and then snap them down, and from there you have your Thunderstrike spell to burst them down. You can also use Harmonic spell for that massive step bonus at the start of battle so that you are able to burst the opponent down. So if you were to ask me what's the biggest problem with this team, it would be against the multitude of strong Wilders team. So if you take a look at the meta right now, there's quite a fair bit of Wilders, right? So even, okay, let's say, right, this is a Wilders team technically because you have a Wilders call with Bonnie. This is technically partially Wilders as well because you have quite a fair bit of Wilders, and then you have Iron Armors obviously. And if you run this team for the Wilders comp, then Graveborn is quite disadvantageous in terms of the factional side. So this team is decently strong from the synergy side, but it's not that strong against all the other top tier matchups. Definitely a team that you can form. There's another variant which is the Igor plus Harrock team setup. So those are the different teams you can use. I think we will just put this one with, for example, Harrock, right? So put Harrock Assassin, okay. Valkar can be with other sustain or other really annoying unit, like for example Igor, right? So these are the different combinations you can use. But the idea of this team is getting the Graveborn factional talent and then using units that can quickly burst down the enemy. So this is where Harrock comes to mind, this is where Vala comes to mind, Sylvina comes to mind, and then if you have Velka built up, slot her in for that 60 attack speed for all the allies at the start of battle with that additional damage negation ability, then you have a pretty decent Graveborn Assassin teams in general. So that's pretty much it for this top 5 Clashfront teams. Let me know what you guys want to see with regards to Clashfronts in the next few videos, which I'll be talking about. And also, if you have more teams to share, feel free to discuss it in the comment section down below. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys!